Welcome back. In today's session, we'll learn about object-oriented programming in Python. So let's get started. What is object-oriented programming? Object-oriented programming is we should have a class, and based on the class, we'll be creating an object. So Python is a versatile programming language which supports multiple programming styles. So it supports functional programming as well as it supports class-based or object-oriented programming. Okay, class is an object. So an object can have any entity that has attribute and behaviors. Like for example, let's say we have a bird. Okay, for specific, let's say a parrot. So let's say we have a parrot and it has two attributes. Let's say so it has the attributes like the name, it can have age, it can have color, and it can have some behavior, right? So behavior, it's like it can fly, it can sing, etc. Right? So since this is an object, so we say parrot is an object. We can say that a class is a blueprint. How can we say that? Because like let's say an object is simply a collection of data. A class is a blueprint of that object. So let's take an example. How do we define a class? Okay, we need to learn how we should define a class. So defining a class is very easy in Python. We can say class and it will be class name and we will have the definition. Class definition. For now, let me just comment this part. So this is how we can create a class. Correct? So let's say we want to create a class called bike, and this bike will have, like we said, that it has few attributes. So attributes can be like name. So for now on, let's add it to empty, and we have gear, and which is also equal to 0. So these are attributes. If you can see, we have a bike, and then this bike has certain attributes, right? Bike is the name of the class, and name and gear is the attributes or variable inside this class. And for now, the name is empty and the gear is 0, right? The variables inside a class are called attributes. I told you here attributes. So what are attributes? Any variable that are inside this class are called attribute. So we just say that classes are blueprint. So now what we can say is whenever I create an object of this class, so that object would have these two properties or these attributes. Okay. So let's create an object of this class. So I can say pulsar is equal to bike. So this way we can create an object of a class. So this is class, this is the name of this class bike, and this pulsar is the object of this bike. So I can have this way, I can have multiple objects. I can have here Yamaha, I can have here TVS, I can have here unicorn. So these are the different objects of this bike. So each bike will have this attribute name and gear. So now we can use this object to access the class attributes. So how can we say that? Let's start with pulsar. Let's say pulsar dot, so we have their name, right? Name. What I could say, so which type of bike do we have in pulsar? Let's say we have pulsar 180, right? So this is the name. And if I want to access this attribute, let's print pulsar. Let's try to run this code. So we see some gibberish. But now if I say pulsar dot name, and if I run this code, you'll see we have this name, pulsar 180. The same way I can assign pulsar dot gear. So currently it is in 4th gear. So if I run this code again and let me add gear here, and if I run this code again, you will see I have pulsar 180 and it is currently in 4th gear. So far, we have learned how to assign an attribute. We learned about the attributes. Now we can have a behavior also, right? Let's take another example. So let me comment this part, or let me just comment this print part, and let's create a new class. Let's say we have a class called room, and a room can have two attributes, length, which is equal to 0, and we can have breadth, which is also equal to 0, right? And we have a method or a behavior. Let's say def calculate area self. We'll say here print, let's say f area of room is equal to, it's very simple, let's say self dot length into self dot breadth. So if you see, we have these two class here. I had class bike. So this class bike has just two attributes, right? Name and gear, but it doesn't have any methods. If we have any Python function inside a class, and we call that a method. Okay. So now we have this class room. So these are the attributes of this room class, and this is the method of this room class. Okay. So what's the difference between function and a method? So function, it's normal when we use some keyword called def and with the name of the function. So there's a function, but any function that resides inside a class, it is called a methods. Okay. So now let's start to create an object of this class. Let's say dining room equal to, we can say room, and you can say dining room dot length equal to, let's say 100, and you can say dining room dot breadth equal to, let's say 80. So now if I want to find the area of this room, so I can simply say dining room dot calculate area. So if I run this code, we'll see area of room is equal to 8000. Why is that? Because length into breadth is 8000, right? So now let's understand what exactly we have in this method. So first of all, we define a method. The difference between function and method is that in this method, we'll have this self. So what is this self? So let's print this self. Let's run this code again. So when I print self, you see we have this object. It means that we have this object at certain location. So when we say self, so it's currently corresponding to this particular object, which is dining room. Okay. So when we say self here, so the self means we are pointing it to this dining room. So that's why I'm able to say self dot length. When I say self dot length, let me say self dot length, and let me also print the breadth, self dot breadth, and then run this code. And you see we have this 110. I assign this length to 100, and then I assign this breadth to 80 right here. So when I say self dot length, so I'm able to access the attribute of this object, correct? So that means what is this self? This self means this particular object. So if you can see here, we have this calculate, it should have this area. It's okay. That's typo. So you can see we are assigning the value of this length and breadth using this, right? Like this. So we can also assign a variable using a constructor. Okay. So for example, let's say we have a class called human, and let's say it has a name equal to some empty string, and let's say it has age of equal to some empty string for now, correct? So what's a constructor? So if you can see here, let me just define the constructor. So if you can see a constructor here, for now, let me just comment, let me say pass, so that if I don't get this error. If you see, we have this underscore underscore init underscore underscore. So these type of methods are called dunder method. What are they called? They are called dunder, D-U-N-D-R, dunder method. Okay. So here, if you can see here, this underscore underscore init method, this is a constructor. So when is this function called? This function will be called each time a new object of this class is created. So let's say we have tab. Okay. We'd say human. So let me print here, I'm cold. So let me run this code. So for now, let me comment this part and let me run this code. So you can see I'm cold. That means whenever we create an object, whenever a new object is created, then this constructor method is being called. Okay. So this constructor method, like if we define or we don't define, it will be called by itself. Okay. I want to initialize the name and age, right? So this should be, let's say 0 for now. It should be number. So here, this constructor can accept 2 arguments. So I can say here name, and I can say here age, correct? So now what I can say is self dot name is equal to name, and I can say self dot age equal to age. So now when I create an object of this class, I need to pass the name and this age. For this instance, let's say Pratap, and I can say 20. Okay. So let's print here. So let's print name and age, and let's run this code again. So you see, so whenever we instantiate a class, so whatever we are passing here, this is going and we are getting in this value. And then we are setting these values inside these variables. So when I say self.name, what I mean is I'm meaning to this attribute of this particular object. Okay. So here, when I say self.name, it basically refers to the attribute of this Pratap, correct? So if we use a constructor to initialize values inside a class, we need to pass the corresponding value during the object creation of the class, which we are doing here. This is the basic concept of class. So we have learned about constructor, we have learned about how we can define a class, we have learned about the attributes, we have learned different ways of creating an object, like we can create an object this way by passing an argument like this, or we can do by assigning the attributes like this. These are multiple ways of creating a object based on the class. So what we can say, so a class is a blueprint and objects are created based on that blueprint. Okay. So here we have created a class which has only attributes, and then we create an object based on that, and we assign the attribute by using object dot notation. So pulsar is an object dot name. So this is the attribute. We assign the value, and then we created a class. which has two attributes here, length and breadth, and also we have a method here. So whenever we define a method inside this class, we should always have this self as the first parameter, because we should always know that this is the current instance, which is this dining room. So when I say self, so it means that at that moment it is the dining room. Okay. So in here I'm able to access the attribute of that object. When I say self.length, so what I mean is it is dining room.length. So when I say self.breadth, what I mean is dining room.breadth. Okay. So we also learn about constructor. A constructor is being called whenever we instantiate a class. So whenever we create a new object of that class, this constructor method is being called. Okay, so we'll learn more about classes and object in upcoming sections. So please follow along and code along with me.